1, 2. 1.
Emmanuel College acknowledges the land on which we learn, create and grow is the traditional lands of the Pigmerong people of the Gunditjmara Ma Nation, who have educated their children in their language and spirituality and in the traditions of their cultures for many thousands of years.
We also acknowledge and respect the cultural diversity of students, families and staff represented in the Emmanuel College community in the past, present and future. We support the principles of a reconciled Australia for all its people in the interest of our children, tomorrow's leaders.
Good evening and welcome to an evening of inspiration. Thank you to our college captains Lucy Alhaj and Finn Cook, who acknowledge the country we gather on tonight. I am Bree Fox, one of the college vice captains. Creating the atmosphere tonight as you gathered in the cafe were Emmanuel College students Molly Kellermeyer and Akira Fishlard, accompanied by Miss Ailey Tate and Don Stewart. Please welcome Emmanuel College Principal Mr. Peter Morgan to begin tonight's celebration of achievement.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much to our captains there for helping us to begin the evening. And so let me begin by saying special guests, inspiring alumni, young alumni achievers, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2022 Evening of Inspiration. Well, just over 2 years ago, when we held the last Evening of Inspiration in the Lighthouse Theatre, there was an audience of around about 600 people. And the night was kicked off by the Emmanuel College Concert Band performing Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, which was conducted by a sartorially resplendent head of music dressed as Freddie Mercury. It was an amazing night, recognising inspiring alumni and for the first time 2 years ago, young alumni achievers. It also saw current staff and students perform and entertain and receive recognition for some of the amazing things the current generation of young people do during their school years and supported by the Emmanuel staff. But a lot has changed since 2019. To start with, I didn't need to put on any makeup here tonight to appear in our smaller, more intimate theatre. As you know, we were due to hold this special event in July last year with an equally full and entertaining program. But our world is now different to that in which we last recognised students of this school who had gone on to achieve in ways that inspire us. What hasn't changed is that graduates of this school and its predecessors, St Anne's and CBC, continue to do things in a multiplicity of fields that make a difference and have a positive impact on our communities locally, nationally and internationally. Tonight we will induct Graham Warburton, Jacinta Reddan, Anthony Leddin, Alison Farley, Inala Cooper and John McGrath into the Emmanuel College Inspiring Alumni. We will also induct Gary Roberts and Tom O'Connor, Meleita Crimmin, Daniel O'Keefe, James Cole, Stephanie Thiberge and Dylan Lesock into the Young Alumni Achievers. I congratulate each inductee for the ways in which they have excelled in a chosen pathway or in the way they have rendered service to our community. And I thank each inductee for accepting this honour and for the ways in which their achievements may inspire present and future generations of Emmanuel students. Individually and collectively, our inductees affirm that an Emmanuel education enables individuals to excel in the pathways they choose. And we recognise in each inductee that special attribute that some humans have, the capacity to inspire others to be and to do better. Tonight we will see and hear from those who have made a difference or from those responding on their behalf. We celebrate with them and we thank them. To the family of John McGrath, especially his daughters Joanne and Karen, representing the family tonight. On behalf of the college community, I share my condolences with you following the death of your father John before tonight's induction could take place. And while not appearing on stage tonight, I do give thanks to the inspiring work of the teachers and the staff of this college, whom we couldn't accommodate in their entirety here in the theatre tonight. Finally, I wish to pay tribute to the women, the 8 Sisters of Mercy, who 150 years ago this year completed an extraordinary 17,000 kilometre journey from their homeland in Ireland to Warrnambool. And on their arrival, purchased Wyton House, after which this theatre, Wyton Theatre, is named, from Captain John Ardley, to establish on the 1st of July 1872 the very first school on this site. I trust that those women, if they are watching tonight's induction from afar, will be overwhelmed with the same joy and pride that we feel to be part of the Emmanuel community they pioneered. So please enjoy tonight's evening of inspiration and savour the wonderful achievements of our inductees, whom we recognise and congratulate for their inspiration to us. Please enjoy the night.
Before Graham Warburton set foot in South Vietnam as a young soldier, there was already a mountain range unofficially named in his honour. The Nuiden Hills, a stronghold of the Viet Cong, were nicknamed the Warburtons, or Warbies, by Graham's battalion during their training at Holsworthy Base, New South Wales. It was a joke based off the lyrics of a popular song at the time, but this off-the-cuff tribute could not have proven more fitting. On the battlefield, Private Warburton, or Nug as he was known, proved to indeed be a mountain of courage, loyalty, and strength of character. Conscripted in a controversial scheme that was made law without a referendum, Graham, along with many other young men, was selected for a national service to fight in an unpopular war, simply by virtue of his birth date being pulled from the barrel. Graham accepted the responsibility that his nation had given him, and that his life, which was just coming together, was going to be turned upside down.
Dear Sal, thank you for your letter. Yes, I did have a good time at Surfers, but it's not as good as what it's built up to be, but still good. Well, I'm changing my mind about Vietnam. A lot of people don't realise there's a war on over there, a big war, but if I go, I go. And I think it'll be sometime after Christmas. Just got a report on our blokes, and it's not very nice. The film some fellas brought back with them would make you sick.
It's difficult to imagine the thoughts of a young footballer conscripted from Warrnambool landing in a country so vastly different to his home. The intense heat, the insects, the torrential rain, the towering jungles, and the ever-present dangers of war. Although only 20 years old at the time of his deployment in May 1966, Graham was a natural leader. He arrived supremely fit and ready to fight, and accepted one of the most challenging roles on the battlefield as a forward scout. This is the soldier who walks at the front of the pack, the one who goes first. As fellow soldier and Graham's friend John Harris explains, a forward scout needs to be keen-eyed, cool-headed, and sharply alert to possible dangers. Graham's job was to look out for any signs of the enemy, trampled ground, a tripwire, a bush that looked out of place, while still following the directions of a compass and a map held by a section leader many steps behind him. Graham was, in short, the eyes and ears of his fellow soldiers, and their trust was absolute. As John Harris puts it, it was the most dangerous duty, in a dangerous occupation, in a very dangerous place. Graham's battalion 5 RAR, was constantly involved in active combat beyond the Neweydat base, searching, patrolling and ambushing, and coming under direct fire. His leadership on the battlefield drew the attention of his superiors, who were impressed by his calm, his character, and his dedication to duty. He was soon in line for a promotion, which he declined, as he wanted to remain one of the boys. Graham was a popular soldier with an easy laugh and a good sense of humour, who liked to stir his mates, but he was fully attuned to the horrors of war. His own platoon came under mortar attack, leaving many of his friends killed or seriously injured. His company was also part of a sweep through after the ferocious Battle of Long Tan, where soldiers had to pick their way through hundreds of dead bodies. In the face of such trauma, Graham maintained his faith and strong connection to home. He wrote letters whenever he could, and never left a letter unanswered. In these letters, Graham would occasionally offer glimpses of the reality of war and his very human fears. In one letter he told of the nightmare over here, and how he had lost another mate, and you don't know when your turn is coming.
Dear Sal, I suppose you heard about us being mortared? I've never prayed so fast and so much. It was busy, like all hell had broke loose, and I'd never thought I'd get out of it alive. They were landing as close as 20 yards away. The good Lord must have been with me that day, but not with a few of us. Les was a good mate of mine, but we will always remember him. Dear Sal, we got mortared again, 21 wounded. No wonder my nerves are jumpy. I feel about 30 years old. When I get home, I think I'll sleep for months.
That letter was written in September 1966, just 3 months after Graham had turned 21, and just weeks before his death. Private Warburton was mortally wounded by a sniper shot to the stomach while on patrol in the Neweydat area on the 1st of October 1966. He was again the forward scout, the man who went first. To quote John Harris, "It's difficult to measure the value of a person's life that did not extend past his 21st birthday. But if it is measured by the significance and weight of loss placed on it by his mates, family, and those who knew him, then in Nug's case, it is immense."
Graham's induction tonight will be accepted by his sister, Mrs. Judith Mackenzie.
I'll put that there too. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, that's heavy. Thank you. Okay, deep breath. For anyone who isn't aware, Sal is my family's nickname for me, sort of thing. So I'm Judith Sal. 378-6978 is a number that I've never forgotten all those years ago, despite difficulties with phone numbers and other numbers that we should remember. And it's rather mind-boggling that my younger, fun-loving, mischievous brother, Private Graham Francis Anthony Warburton, had his name on so many memorials throughout Australia and even in America. For some reason, they have included his confirmation name of Anthony which generally makes Graham's name the longest and easily recognisable at any of these memorials. I'm doubling up a little bit here about the Warburton Mountains, so I apologise for that. A range of hills in the Fuk-Tui province are still known as Warbies or Warburton Mountain, which were named after Graham by a fellow student, and as was explained after that popular song, Don't Go on Warburton Mountain. About 5 years ago, my granddaughter travelled to Vietnam and became engaged on that mountain. A close friend of Graham and our family completed a quilt for an exhibition entitled Colours of Australia. She based it around Vietnam using Graham's number, not his name, and called it The Years That Were But Should Not Have Been. It travelled all around Australia for about 5 years and spent time on display at the Australian War Memorial. He was also the subject of a winning short story at one of their anniversary things. Graham loved life and people and sport. He loved his sport, winning 2 premierships with the South Warrnambool under-18s and then the reserves before being conscripted. A little bit about conscription, which was so controversial. In both World Wars, conscription was introduced to bolster the numbers, and these were done in a democratic manner through referendums. In the 1950s, national service was introduced, which included everyone of a certain age, and it lasted for about 3 months. In 1964, the government decided to introduce selective national service without a referendum and passed a law that all those turning 20 in 1965 had to register. Then there was a process of birthday ballots similar to the Tats Lotto that we have today, using marbles with birth date numbers on them. And Graham's came out in the first intake. His birth date was the 29th of June and the 30th of June was the cut-out point for the first intake. But he accepted his fate, and for the following 2 years, despite being strongly encouraged to go AWL to New Zealand by another Warrnambool conscriptee, he decided to remain and go on with what life had dealt, the hand that life had dealt to him. Graham enjoyed the mateship and physicality of army life. He was so proud at his passing out parade. He really stood out in Puckapunyal, and he'd grown into a strapping, confident young man. His letters did highlight the escalation of atrocities in Vietnam and the likelihood of Nashos, as they were called, being involved, which he accepted. Graham did not enjoy school very much, except for the social and sport, and I was astounded by the number of letters that he wrote, which are extremely precious now. When he arrived in Vietnam in May 1966, he was very affected by the poverty of the people, and he wrote about that a lot. And he felt that they urgently required help, which was supplied by the Australian Army. They really did a great job over there. He spent his 21st birthday in the jungle and often commented about the taxing weather and terrain. But he always emphasised the need for helping people, even though some of them were suspected enemies. He proved to be a competent, trustworthy and popular soldier, and was given the job of the Forward Scout, which is what he was doing on the 1st of October 1966, when he was fatally shot by a sniper as he walked into a clearing. However, this was the second time in 20 years that Mum and Dad had suffered a military tragedy, as Dad's twin brother, Ozzy, died as a prisoner of war after 3 years' imprisonment on Ambon in World War II. It took the Army 3 weeks to fly Graham's body home for the memorable military funeral. But I think Graham would have been very impressed with the police motorbike escort and the band playing as it processed up Liebig Street. Even at this time, though, there was so much anti-Vietnam feeling in society, we as a family were rather hesitant to talk about Graham, despite being very proud of his efforts and positive feedback from his fellow soldiers. It took 20 years, a little over 20 years actually, to inscribe Graham and David Carroll's names on the local war memorial here. And we're very aware of the trials and tribulations of the returned Vietnam vets through his numerous reunions. Graham's nickname of Nugget was given to him by a family friend, as he was rather chubby as a toddler. The Warburton family sincerely thanks Peter Morgan and members of the Recognition Committee for bestowing this honour on our brother. We also thank Gavin Neville for the initiative of nominating Graham, and John Harris, who wrote the most magnificent letter about training with Graham and being over in Vietnam with him. It's a pity there wasn't more recognition by society of all those who served. I'm sure Mum and Dad would have appreciated this whilst they were still alive. Candace is to be highly commended on her conscientious efforts and communication in compiling this tonight after all the hassles were. There were numerous lessons to be learned from Australia's involvement in Vietnam, particularly with regard to the issue of conscription. We can only hope and pray that those will not be repeated in the future. Thank you for listening, and God bless all those like Graham who thought they were doing the correct and dutiful thing for their country. Thank you.
Some career paths move in a straight line, but that of Jacinta Reddan has taken in politics, media, commerce, communications, and a kiss on the cheek from a rolling stone. It's a path that's been full of sliding door moments, where small decisions have lasting impacts, starting with a St Anne's English teacher, Sally Hughes, urging Jacinta to take up work experience at the Warrnambool Standard. This led to an after-school job at the paper as a 15-year-old, and an entree to the world of media. Mrs. Hughes was an early inspiration to Jacinta and nurtured her love of writing and a curiosity about the world, two ideal qualities for journalism. The Standard went on to offer Jacinta a cadetship after Year 12, but Jacinta turned it down in favour of enrolling at a university in Melbourne. Unfortunately, soon after enrolling, Jacinta found she couldn't afford to study in Melbourne, so she asked the Standard if the prized cadetship was still an offer. It was. The door slid open again, and Jacinta stepped onto the first rung of a highly successful career in communications, both in Australia and overseas. After 3 years at the Standard, Jacinta moved to Melbourne, where she worked alongside some of Australia's best journalists for what is now the Herald Sun, covering courts and crime. Jacinta found the criminal justice system fascinating and urges every student to spend a day in a courtroom to see how quickly a life can change, regardless of who we are. Such strong journalism experience opened the door to a job in politics, with Jacinta joining the Victorian Government Media Unit under Joan Kirner, despite only being in her early 20s. The newsroom beckoned, however, so Jacinta made the decision to fly to London and find work on Fleet Street, then the mecca for print journalists the world over. On the way, she stopped in Hong Kong to visit some old colleagues, and life took a different trajectory. "I really fell in love with the place," she says. "I had some extraordinary experiences, and stayed." Jacinta started working in Hong Kong with the likes of Cathay Pacific, Marriott Hotels, and major conglomerates while working in a PR agency. Jacinta then landed what could only be described as a dream job with Tourism Australia in Hong Kong, promoting Australia across Asia, and particularly to the Chinese market in the lead up to the 2000 Sydney Olympics. But promoting her home country stirred pangs of homesickness, so after almost 10 years away, Jacinta returned to Australia. For the next 7 years, she worked in a variety of senior communication roles, including with the Victorian Government Media Unit under Premier Steve Bracks, Tourism Victoria, and Aged and Community Services Australia. The pull of Hong Kong, however, remained strong. In 2007, Jacinta returned to Hong Kong with 2 young children, becoming a single parent early on her second tour. She continued a successful corporate career, including being appointed Deputy Manager Director of global PR company Goal & Harris Hong Kong, and later Director of Communications for insurance giant Prudential Asia. Her career took her frequently across Asia and to London and New York. Today, Jacinta is a permanent resident of Hong Kong and at the top of her game as CEO of the Australian Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, a position she has held for the last 4 years. She recently stepped down to pursue her own business, with her first client being one of the world's largest law firms. She also serves on the advisory board of a Perth-based cybersecurity company. During her time at Auscham, Jacinta guided a complete transformation of what is Australia's largest international chamber of commerce, turning around its budget and a falling membership, and creating a global voice for all expat Australians.
The Auscham Virtual Intern Program equips the students for a world of work that didn't exist this time last year. We've been able to bring incredible Asia experience sitting right here in Hong Kong to students from Australia working on their desks on the East Coast.
All of Jacinta's skills have come together as she engages with the highest level of government and corporate leaders on critical issues around policy, government relations, trade, and major investment and geopolitics. And what about the Rolling Stones? Prudential Insurance, as it happens, sponsored a Rolling Stones tour of the Asia Pacific, and Jacinta got to meet the band, where Keith Richards gave her a kiss on the cheek. It was, she jokes, the highlight of what has been a truly dynamic career.
Jacinta's induction tonight will be accepted by past editor of The Standard, Mr. Frank Beattie.
Just on behalf of Jacinta, there's a couple of things I'd like to say. Unfortunately, she can't be here tonight, but I can tell you that she's deeply honoured and humbled to receive this award, and she, of course, she would love to be here, but not only to receive that, but also to hear the stories of the other recipients. And as has been said, she is a resident of Hong Kong, and as you're well aware, due to the circumstances that prevail in the world now, there's no chance of her getting home. However, she'd still like to congratulate all the other recipients on their achievements and on the recognition that they are receiving this evening. And in that, I'd also like to pass on for the congratulations to the people who put together the little presentation, and for the previous one, and I dare say for the others. Well, that said, Jacinta, she started as a Year 9 student, and her journey started as a Year 9 student when she, with the help of a teacher at that time, which was Sally Hughes, where she came to the Standard, and actually at that particular time I was the Chief of Staff, where she gained some work experience, and she was quite good at that. And of course that led on to her then getting a part-time job. And back in those days, well, there was quite a lot of things, but particularly where everything is electronic now, well, it was all in hard copy paper in that day. And of course the part-time job where she'd be in after school, just cutting up all the copy and putting it in her respective places. And that from then led her on to getting a cadetship, which she went through well, and which, well, I had a lot to do with her over that period of time. But along the way to that, what she did really appreciate was she had a lot of support and assistance from the wonderful staff and teachers that she had here, including Sister Patsy, who she has mentioned and said that's one that she was really taken with, and she's forever grateful for that. And of course, on the completion of a cadetship, just as many young people, she wanted to spread her wings, and she, as said, transferred to Melbourne, and then of course from there she's been overseas, which you've just heard, and then in Hong Kong. In fact, I remember the first time she was in Hong Kong, I met her there myself in 1998, which was quite good, and had a few days there. But and then she was back in Australia, and you've seen just where she's gone, and has now returned to Hong Kong. But what is quite obvious is what an illustrious career that she has carved forward for herself, and she is to be congratulated on that. And while she can't be here tonight, look, I'd like to conclude, because obviously we've been in contact with each other over this evening, and I'd like to conclude with a quote, and it is, I do look forward at some time in the future to being able to return to Australia and to visiting Emmanuel College with some of my cohort, looking at you, Michael Barling and Rosina Gannon, and our teaching. So we just hope to say that we hope that this is not too far in the future. And thanks very much, and on her behalf, thank you kindly.
Replications and varieties in your trial?
धेरै ठुलो एरिया छ हैन, धेरै रेप्लिकेसन छन् भने यो स्प्रेड मल छर्ने मेसिन हामीले प्रयोग गर्न सक्छौँ।
So I worked out the area of my trial and how much fertilizer I need. So my trial starts from here and goes down to that rock. Okay.
As a professional plant breeder, Anthony Leddin loves digging into the secret life of plants and harvesting ways to overcome world hunger. For the past 20 years, he has been on a quest to help feed the world by developing sustainable, nutritious crops for both humans and livestock. At the root of his work lies a simple philosophy. Give a person vegetable seeds, feed them for a year. Give them fruit trees, feed them for many years. But give them knowledge to breed plants and feed them for a lifetime. It's a quest that must outrun the ticking clock of climate change and a rapidly growing world population. As Anthony says, by 2050, less than 30 years away, the world's population is going to reach about 10 billion people. We have to increase our food production from current levels by another 70%. On top of what we already produce. That's massive amounts of food, he says. Adding to the urgency is a shortage of expert plant breeders, with more people retiring from the field than joining it. In fact, after finishing Year 12 at Emmanuel, Anthony was one of only 5 students studying plant breeding at Melbourne University. He had originally planned to study veterinary science until, he jokes, he found he wasn't smart enough. Anthony, who was raised on a farm in Yambuk, switched to agricultural science degree and found that plants were his real passion. He now moves between life as an agronomist or crop scientist in Australia and volunteer worker as a plant breeding expert in developing countries. His volunteer work began with a UN project in India, where, supported by the Canberra-based Crawford Fund, he helped develop sorghum and millet crops. This experience planted the seed in Anthony's mind for a project called Plant Breeders Without Borders, based on Doctors Without Borders, where plant experts volunteer alongside local groups and farmers. The team works to boost crop yield by working with familiar plants or by exploring different ones, such as the bamboo groundnut, a drought-tolerant nut that Anthony believes has untapped potential as a food source. Through patience and persistence, this global tree of life has been growing steadily for the past 20 years and slowly changing communities, one plant at a time. In that time, Anthony has worked on crop projects around the world, including Ethiopia, Vietnam, Nepal, Indonesia, and East Timor, and on seed collection in Israel, Turkey, and Spain, securing what funds he could to help cover the costs. A major breakthrough came during a conference in Beijing in 2016, where pharmaceutical giant Bayer was so impressed by Anthony's vision, it agreed to fund several projects. These included Indonesia and Nepal, and next year, Ecuador, Ghana, Tanzania, and Fiji. Given the global reach of Anthony's work, it's not surprising he's been described as the Indiana Jones of the plant world, scouring the planet with tweezers in hand, searching for endangered, edible plants and collecting their seeds. Back home, however, Anthony is an equally rare breed. He is the only professional pasture breeder in Australia, working in the private sector for the pasture seed industry. In his job with Valley Seeds, Anthony researches drought-tolerant feed for cattle, dairy, and sheep. Whether he is working in Australia or Africa, however, the goal is the same: food security. Food security, as Anthony explains, not only prevents famine, but civil unrest, war, and people being forced to become refugees. As Anthony says, when I started plant breeding, I only thought about the food aspect. But then you start thinking about the ethical side of things. You start thinking about how, if people can't feed themselves, what's going to happen? Anthony's work is part of making sure this question never needs to be answered.
It's great to be back at Emmanuel. I started life here at CBC and then changed into Emmanuel in Year 9. So thanks for the award. It's for me, I don't do what I do for recognition or awards or I really, I'd feel more comfortable sitting out there with you at the moment in the crowd, recognising the other people. But for me, school was really important. And when I was contacted by Candice about the award, I thought it was really important that I come along and talk about how important education is for setting up your life and finding out what you're really here for. So Emmanuel College was really important to me. I had a lot of mentors and that there as my time at school here. People like Brother Wright. He was a great mentor for me, and he was like a moral compass for me that led me down this path, I suppose, of being more interested in the overseas development work and the importance of that for people who don't have what we have here, all the things of that life comes easy for us, I suppose. I went to school and had a great education, but they don't have access to those sorts of things in the places that I go to. So I really wanted to emphasise the importance of that for students today, how important your education is. And life, I guess for me, it's a great mystery, I suppose. You go out there in life and you have to work out what you're really sent here to do. And with the education basis that I got from Emmanuel College, I was lucky enough to find a passion in plant breeding. And that's what's led me down to the path of creating an NGO like Plant Breeders Without Borders, is I'm really passionate about it. So for kids that go to school here, I say to you, really focus on your education, and it's important that you sacrifice yourself for your education. You do whatever you can to hopefully one day that will make you realise what you're sent here to do in life and find out that mystery. So thank you very much for Emmanuel College for giving me this award, and I hope the adventures that I've had and the opportunities that I've had with the work that I've done, going and working in developing countries and seeing a lot of the world, that's special for me. But we all have our special jobs that we have to do here. Everyone in society is important. You don't have to travel overseas to do special things. We all have our special roles here. So thanks to my family, my mum and dad, my teachers, and that got me here. And all I can say is, in the future, for you kids, try and sacrifice yourself so that you can get to those goals of what you were really meant to do in your life. So thanks very much, Emmanuel College, for the award. Very appreciated.
Good evening. We'd now like to take a moment to recognise some of our more recent alumni with the awarding of our Young Alumni Achievers. This is only our second group to be recognised as Young Alumni Achievers, as Peter mentioned earlier, with the first group receiving their awards in 2019. These awards will be presented a little bit differently to the Inspiring Alumni, and when we read out the recipients of each award, after we finished reading out the information about them. We'd invite them to come to the stage and remain on the stage until we have all of our young alumni here, and then our final recipient will respond on behalf of all of them. So we begin with Coast Aid organisers Gary Roberts and Tom O'Connor from the class of 2012. Amid the bushfire crisis of 2020, Gary and Tom organised and staged a huge community music event that raised over $16,500 for bushfire relief. While the boys had never organised anything of this scale before, they quickly learned that asking questions leads to answers and support, and momentum was rapidly built. Within 19 days, the boys had all the permits, the musicians, the sponsors and food vans they needed, attracting a tremendous response from the community of Warrnambool. The event was recognised on Australia Day by the Warrnambool City Council in 2021 for Community Event of the Year. Please welcome and congratulate Gary Roberts and Tom O'Connor. Our next couple of recipients are unfortunately apologies this evening, but nonetheless we recognise them. From the class of 2004, we congratulate Meleita Crimmin. Meleita is the senior prosthesist and orthotist. I knew I would make mistakes on this bit. There is a mouthful of terms in here that I've been practising all week and I already messed it up on the very first one. Meleita is the senior prosthesist and orthotist at the Royal Children's Hospital, Melbourne. She has a degree in biomedical science from Melbourne University and a master's in prosthetics and orthotics from La Trobe University. She is currently undertaking a master's in health administration. Meleita has held various volunteer roles in the profession, including a board member of the International Society of Prosthetics and Orthotics, Australian National Member Society, and the Australian Orthotic and Prosthetic Association's Congress Committee. More recently, Meleita's experience has found her on many occasions a guest lecturer and assessor for La Trobe University's prosthetic and orthotic course, and working in collaboration with Melbourne Uni on various 3D printing manufacturing projects. Most notably, a project set to improve outcomes for patients with facial burns and the development of myoelectric prosthetic hands for children. Unfortunately, Meleita can't be with us tonight. We extend and congratulate her on her achievement. Well done. Another apology this evening is from the class of 2006, and we congratulate Daniel O'Keefe. Daniel's career with the AFL began straight out of school at Emmanuel when he was drafted to the Sydney Swans AFL Football Club. But sadly for Daniel, numerous injuries ultimately forced him to retire completely from playing at the age of 22. However, a new pathway quickly emerged following a brief stint as a PGA professional golf trainee, a career in coaching. This newfound drive saw Daniel take on any opportunity to coach he could find. It led to his first serious coaching position as the senior coach at Geelong West Football Club in the Geelong Football League, then with the under-18 Geelong Falcons. His first year at the Falcons saw the team win the premiership, impressively breaking a 17-year drought. From the Falcons, Daniel has gone on to become the VFL assistant coach with the Geelong Cats, the development coach with Carlton Football Club, and most recently has been appointed as the head coach of the Carlton Reserves or VFL side. As a new team, Daniel's role involved establishing a VFL program from scratch, now comprising a strong playing list of 28 and over 20 staff. Carlton has a great reserves program that is already filtering ready-made players into the AFL. Fortunately, Daniel can't be with us tonight, but we extend our congratulations to him. Well done. Our next recipient is here, and from the class of 2016, we congratulate James Cole. James is a videographer whose passion for film has jettisoned into a business now attracting national clients. James has a degree in commerce, majoring in marketing and management from ACU, which has unintentionally supported the transformation of his hobby into a nationally reaching business. James has also worked for Aerial Vision Services, where he shot drone footage for big clients such as Racing Victoria, long-running television series Neighbours, and Australian Soccer A-League teams in Melbourne. Now working for himself from his home base in Warrnambool, James works for local clients including Southwest TAFE, Emmanuel College, and national clients such as Woolworths and Music Victoria. And at the start of this evening's ceremony, the short film that you saw was created by James. James is also an active volunteer on the board of the Warrnambool Surf Lifesaving Club, directing their marketing and communication needs. Please welcome and congratulate James. From the class of 2008, Stephanie Thiberge. Stephanie is a commercial fashion photographer who, until recently, was based in one of the world's major fashion centres, Paris. Using her experience and connections, Stephanie created a platform to bring up and coming Australian and New Zealand designers into the highly competitive fashion scene in France via a publication called Peachy Keen magazine. Printed in French and English, the magazine aspires to promote the geographically distant designers while promoting strong ethical and sustainability values. Prior to publishing Peachy Keen, Stephanie attained her professional photography diploma through Parisian Photography Institute, SPIOS. From there, she has worked in both Paris and Montreal as a freelance photographer for European and North American design and magazines, including cosmetics giant L'Oreal. Stephanie always returns to Emmanuel College during her trips to Warrnambool and shares her experiences and technical knowledge with our studio arts students. On her last visit in 2019, she gave a masterclass to aspiring senior photography students. Unfortunately, due to Stephanie's travels, she can't be with us tonight. We extend our congratulations to Stephanie. Well done. And finally, from the class of 2008, Dylan Lesock. Dylan has built a multi-million-dollar business from the ground up with nothing more than a can-do attitude. At the age of 24, Dylan decided to change paths away from the sports marketing industry with the goal of being his own boss. Starting with a little research to identify a gap in the market that he could break into with limited funds and experience, Dylan began Clark Clean. It was named after his nan as a homage to her unwavering love and support. Establishing the business with only a website, a vacuum and a mop, he put his hand up for any job he came across, all while still working full-time. In some cases, he would be teaching himself how to complete the task via YouTube videos. This dedication saw Clark Clean become self-sustaining within 6 months. Now one of the biggest in Ballarat, it is contracted to clean council venues and events, independent stadiums and sporting grounds, local businesses and festivals throughout Victoria, and continues to expand. In addition to the business, the Leadership Ballarat Western Region program awarded Dylan a scholarship in 2017. This 12-month community leadership program involved working with local government, including focus group time in Canberra with the then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull and the opposition leader Bill Shorten. In 2019, Dylan was an ambassador for the Ballarat Foundation's highly successful Dancing with Our Stars fundraiser. This involved 12 weeks of full-time dance training, with the initiative collectively raising over $112,000. More recently, Dylan's early passion for the fitness industry has reignited, driving him to open his second business, a gym, The Underground. Please welcome and congratulate Dylan. And we now invite Dylan to the lectern to make an address on behalf of all of our Young Alumni Achievers.
Cheers, thanks. Thanks, guys. Out of all the people on stage, Candice could have picked, I think she's picked the worst public speaker, so I'll keep it quite short. I think if you asked any of my Year 9 teachers if I'd be up on stage all these years later accepting an award, they would have laughed at you. So I think I've done all right. But I thought I'd just tell a little bit of a story about my time at Emmanuel and why it was so special to me. So I moved out of home when I was 14 and I was lucky enough to be taken in by the Barling family, and Mick Barling was the Year 12 coordinator at the time. And Daniel Barling was one of my best mates. So I was not only embraced by the Barling family, but I was embraced by the whole Emmanuel community. So it really sort of put me on the trajectory to where I am now. And teachers like Karen Pritchard, who saw me 3 times a week for counselling in their own time in my lunch break, sort of really made sure I finished school, and that's sort of why I'm here today. So Emmanuel College is always going to have a very special part in my heart, and it's so cool to see so many young achievers up here, and they're far more talented than I am, that's for sure. So, cool. Thanks.
Well done, Dylan. Thanks very much for those words. I actually did speak to Mick this morning, and he mentioned a little story about when you were in Year 12 with a soccer ball that got kicked into a window at the chapel, which was an interesting story. So congratulations again to our Young Alumni Achievers. It's fantastic to see what you've been able to achieve in such a short period of time since you've left Emmanuel College, and to those that couldn't be with us tonight. Thanks again.
We can only wonder if former St Anne's biology teacher Margaret White remembers a bright student with flaming red hair called Alison Farley, as it was Miss White who inspired now Dr. Farley to pursue a career in science. This stellar career includes being involved in groundbreaking research, publications and patents in cell and developmental biology, all aimed at improving medical treatments for people all around the world. After graduating from La Trobe University in 1995, Alison began her career as a research assistant in one of Australia's most prestigious research centres, the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute of Medical Research, or WEHI. In those early years, Alison was fortunate to be part of a dynamic WEHI team which published numerous papers on understanding protein interactions which could help develop drugs for cancer treatment. From WEHI, Alison travelled to Scotland to work and study at Edinburgh University, where, thanks to her mother's Irish heritage, she was able to enrol in a PhD as an EU citizen, rather than as a far more costly international student. Alison's parents, Thomas and Bridget, worked hard to give their children a good education, and it was a proud day when they flew to Edinburgh to watch Alison graduate with a doctorate from the same university that nurtured Charles Darwin. Her 12 years working at Edinburgh University also marked a critical change in direction for Alison's research. Her new focus became understanding the thymus, a vital part of our immune system. As part of this research, Alison and her team described the fundamental developmental steps in thymus biology, which was published in top international journals. Another major event in Alison's time in Scotland was getting married and having 2 children, and in 2012 they returned to Australia, where Alison took up a position at Melbourne University with Professor Martin Perra, who was among the first to discover human stem cells. More recently, however, she has returned to where it all began. For the past 4 years, Alison has been a senior research fellow at WEHI, where a former boss as a university graduate, Professor Doug Hilton, is now the director. Her work at WEHI involves redefining how platelets are made in the human body, a breakthrough that was met with controversy because it turned 100 years of science on its head. Despite this initial backlash, this work was published in the International Research Journal, the Journal of Experimental Medicine, and has led to many other collaborations. Alison is now working on how to recreate platelet production in the lab at a large scale and testing drugs that help to stimulate this process. This research could ultimately provide a breakthrough with drug treatments that could stimulate platelet production for patients with low platelet count and bleeding. Another project Alison is passionate about is looking at exactly how platelets are involved in preventing brain bleeds in babies. Reducing brain bleeds that could lead to the risk of cerebral palsy and other neurological conditions. This research so far has discovered that unborn babies need platelets to prevent brain bleeds and maintain healthy blood vessels developing. When you don't have platelets, these blood vessels of the brain break down and cause large bleeds. This work has just been published in the international journal Blood. This work has also led to understanding when to boost platelet numbers in the unborn baby, which could prevent cerebral palsy or miscarriage. Throughout all of her achievements, Alison has remained unassuming and humble. In fact, some of her friends are only now realising the global significance of her work. As one friend described it, Alison's ability to forge ahead in a field where women weren't always encouraged, and to work her way up to the position she now holds, is inspirational. Alison admits she is not one to shy away from a challenge or a touch of competition, which is perhaps why, for fun, she also once ran marathons in New York, London and Edinburgh. My sister, she says, always says, "You take things on, you're never scared to do things." There's just something in me that makes me do it.
Thank you for that. I just want to say that, I have a lot of really fond memories of being here at Emmanuel College. We were a group of kids that came over from Port Fairy, and so there was a few of us girls in the same year level. And I'd just like to say that from those 5 girls, 3 of those girls went on and did science at Melbourne Uni and La Trobe University. So that's quite an amazing percentage of girls that went on to do science. So I suppose all I can say is that Emmanuel must have really inspired us, and the teachers we had must have been very inspiring in those years. I also remember having career classes, and I would go having no idea what I wanted to do. And so the teachers would say to me, so what do you like doing? And I would say, well, I really like the biology classes. And so I was just thinking, sitting in the audience, that's amazing. From that decision, I then went on and thought, well, maybe I'll do biological science at La Trobe. And then 30 years later, here I am accepting this award. So that's pretty amazing for a school to sort of push me in that direction and be correct. I'd also just really like to thank Mum and Dad, who couldn't make it here tonight, but they will be watching the recording. They encouraged us all at school throughout our time. But, they were very hardworking parents, and they didn't really have a great concept of academia or university, and they really encouraged us to pursue a career beyond, working in a shop in Port Fairy or whatever. They encouraged us to do what we wanted, and I always remember Mum and I getting on the train from Warrnambool to Melbourne and then heading out to La Trobe for my university interview. And, that would have all been a really big deal for Mum and Dad. So that was great. And then I also was thinking, it was amazing when I said, well, now I'm going to head off to Edinburgh. And I was only 25, 26. So as a parent now, that was amazing for them to encourage that. And when I did that, I didn't return for 12 years. So, that was, again, just really great, encouraging parents. So, I would just like to thank Emmanuel for this award, and just thank you for all the really great memories, but friendships, like 2 of the girls I went through all of Emmanuel with the classes are here today. So, it was a really great time here, and thank you for the award.
Naji Gurjin, Nayu Nilawal Inala, Janu Yaru Buru Rubibi. Hello, my name is Inala. I'm a Yaru woman from Broome in Western Australia, and I live in Melbourne, Victoria.
Growing up in Port Fairy, Inala Dodson first heard the word reconciliation with a small r when a teacher at St Patrick's Primary School described confession. That private act of reconciliation, however, was very different to reconciliation with a capital R between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians that is now central to Inala's life and work as a First Nations woman. As the daughter of highly respected activist Mick Dodson and the niece of Senator Pat Dodson, it was perhaps inevitable that Inala would follow a path in social justice. Mick is a former co-chair of Reconciliation Australia, and Uncle Pat is known as the father of reconciliation, while Inala's mother, Alicia, also instilled strong ethics in both of her children. It was through Mick that Inala had the extraordinary experience of travelling to the United Nations in Geneva as a Year 10 student at Emmanuel College.
Mick was a part of a team of experts from Australia working on the draft of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. For the teenage Inala, it was an awakening. It was on that trip, she says, that I began to understand the concept of self-determination when it comes to Indigenous people who live in colonised countries. That was a real eye-opener, and it instilled in me the importance of social justice and human rights. But despite this early entree to the global stage, Inala didn't pursue a career in human rights straight from Year 12. Instead, a love of dancing, fueled by some memorable rocker Stedfords with Emmanuel, saw Inala complete a Bachelor of Arts in Drama and Contemporary Dance, followed by a period in the Performing Arts. Destiny, however, has a way of finding us. For Inala, it came with the chance to work in the former Victorian Department of Planning and Community Development. Inala was a project officer with the Ministerial Task Force on Aboriginal Affairs, during which she convened statewide forums between the government and local Aboriginal people. She also contributed to the Victorian Indigenous Strategic Plan. Her professional experience saw Inala return to the United Nations in 2010, this time in New York City, and this time not as an observer but as an assistant to her father, who was a member on the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. It was, Inala says, a huge opportunity to see how the UN worked and to build an international network. The event also confirmed Inala wanted to study a Master's in Human Rights Law. Also in 2010, Inala transferred her advocacy skills from the public service to the tertiary sector, first with Monash University and now University of Melbourne. Here, she helps create culturally safe environments in which Indigenous students can flourish. At Monash University, Inala also worked as Deputy College Head of Residential Services and managing the Indigenous Leadership Program across 13 residential halls. Inala was then appointed as the Senior Advisor, Manager of Indigenous Strategy and Engagement at Monash, where, among other things, she provided strategic and cultural advice to the Vice-Chancellor and the Indigenous Advisory Council. She also worked with various faculties and departments to bring the university's Reconciliation Action Plan to life. Since 2017, Inala has been based at University of Melbourne, where she went straight into a leadership role with the Atlantic Fellows for Social Equity program. This program is a collaborative Indigenous-led project aimed at harnessing First Nations knowledge and skills and using this to create meaningful change. Inala's leadership qualities did not go unnoticed, and last year she was promoted into her current role as Director of Murat Barak, the Melbourne Institute for Indigenous Development. In what might otherwise be spare time, Inala volunteers as a director on 4 non-for-profit boards, including one targeting Indigenous youth suicide, and is a regular commentator on ABC News Breakfast and The Drum. Although now a leader in her own right, Inala still draws inspiration from those who paved the way and who continue to fight, like her uncle Paddy, who is in his 70s and still a senator. Inala says, I ask him, aren't you tired? And he says, well, when there's work to be done.
Really nice to see those pictures of when we did Rocker Stedford, because it was here when this used to be a basketball court, and there was a big stage at the end here. And I want to acknowledge Mrs. Mackenzie, who was a huge supporter of our performing arts and the Rock of Stedford with Trudy Sharrock. It's so nice to see you here tonight. And it's really lovely to see how this has all been transformed into the current auditorium, the stage. I still can't believe people are allowed in the convent as well, because, when I was here, I was in the last intake of St Anne's, and Alison and the big girls who were in year 12 when I was in year 7, and there were still nuns living in the convent, so of course it was out of bounds. So seeing how the school has evolved is really exciting, and how it's grown, and particularly as well tonight, the achievements of young alumni is really exciting. I've got a lot of affection for Emmanuel, and I think about school a lot, and I don't know if that's normal. But at work, sometimes people comment that I can touch type without looking at the keyboard. And I have to say it 100% is the most valuable skill I learned at school, because I use it every day. And it's always a bit of fun to remember Mrs. McCosh, who once the piece of cardboard was taken away from the keyboard, that was the test, that you wouldn't look down. And if you did, she would bang the big metre-long wooden ruler on the desk to shock you into looking up. There's so many other teachers as well who I've got such fond memories of, and who were inspiring to me and to other students of mine, including Paul Tobias and some of those teachers as well who have passed away, including Mrs. Bastow and Mr. Hinkston, that really encouraged us to be who we were, be ourselves, and be good people. I also want to thank and acknowledge my oldest friend from Port Fairy, Bridie West, but she's always Bridie Quinn to me, who nominated me for this award this evening. And I want to say thank you to my family who got me through school, and to my husband and my son Buddy, who are here tonight. Thank you. And St Anne's and Emmanuel was really a wonderful place to go to school. And I've got cousins who are still here, children of my cousins who are here too. And it really is a great place to learn and to grow and become yourself. The supportive environment that I had it's evident that that continues today. So thank you very much. I feel very honoured to be included in tonight's I mean, Al, you're like discovering things about blood platelets, and it's amazing the work that you're doing, and so many others. And the other inspiring alumni that we're reminded of in the booklet tonight, it's really an honour to be included amongst those people. So thank you to Peter and to all the current and past staff at Emmanuel for your commitment to to the lives of kids, and then we grow up and we've got kids of our own, and it really is wonderful to be here tonight to celebrate. So thank you.
As a freckle-faced kid growing up on a dairy farm in Killarney, John McGrath had no idea that his life story would take him from selling tyres to state politics to transforming the national conversation around mental health. Like many young boys of his generation, John left school at the end of Year 9 to help on the farm. His father, Jack, was unwell, and John, as the only son, was a much-needed extra pair of hands. John remembers the principal of CBC, Brother Boylan, taking the time to personally visit his parents to try and find a way he could continue at school, but it was not possible. Jack McGrath later passed away while John was still in his teens. Taking on responsibilities at an early age gave John a resilience to adapt to life and its many challenges, the greatest of which was yet to come. After leaving the family farm, John worked in a variety of jobs, first as a factory hand, then a truck driver, a station manager, a credit manager, and a sales manager, before starting his own very successful business in 1972. A tyre business on Raglan Parade, which he sold in 1986, but which still operates today. It was his experiences as a small business owner which prompted John to make a run at state politics to better represent the little guy. It was thought that he had little hope in what was a solid Liberal seat. He ran in 1983 as a National Party candidate and lost on preferences. A second run in 1985 resulted in a shock victory for John. Such was his popularity, John was elected again in 1988, 1992, and again in 1996, before he retired, unbeaten in 1999. As an MP, John was the national spokesman for housing, then transport and labour, and also the party whip. He was appointed Deputy Speaker in 1992 and was a chairman of the committees until his retirement from politics in 1999. During this period, John also faced his greatest personal challenge. One of his 5 children, Shane, suffered from a mental health issue at a time when mental health illness was a source of shame and rarely talked about in the community. Shane had battled depression and schizophrenia for 10 years, but despite the best efforts of his family and a GP to find effective treatment, there was little ongoing support. Shane took his own life in 1993. John remembers taking a phone call from the then Victorian Premier, Joan Kirner, who said, "Nothing prepares you for the loss of one of your own children." Those words stayed with him, and John resolved to do whatever he could to advocate for people and their families who were also battling mental health issues. Using his political contacts, he put together the first national advocacy group, Mental Health Australia, and was its first chairman. In 2000, John was then recruited to be the founding director and deputy chair of Beyond Blue. Together with former Premier Jeff Kennett and former Labor MP Carolyn Hogg. As John says, by removing the stigma of mental health, Beyond Blue has changed the world.
Since Beyond Blue's come on board, there's been an enormous change in the way people view depression and anxiety and mental illness generally in the community. An enormous change, to the point where people no longer cringe. People no longer want to sweep it under the carpet. People want to talk about it. And people say to you, you know, that badge in your coat, isn't that Beyond Blue? My brother got help through Beyond Blue, or my auntie got help through Beyond Blue. This is over a counter in a shop. Would never have happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So we are progressing. And there are several reasons we could go into for that. But by and large, Beyond Blue has normalised discussion about depression and anxiety, and as a consequence, mental illness generally, so that people feel comfortable. That's an enormous advancement, enormous advancement. And what that does, of course, is it provides a segue for people who experience these conditions to actually not feel threatened, but in fact feel like, I think I'll reach out for help. And that is just so important.
While John's son, Shane, died never having received the services he should have, his eldest son, Darren, lives with a mental health condition, but with the services that are now available, he is, says John, a fully functioning, tax-paying member of the community. John went on to become a board member of Headspace and the inaugural chair of the Mental Health Professional Network, and remained an ambassador for Beyond Blue. By 2008, John's work in key roles with organisations such as Beyond Blue, Headspace, Crisis Support Services, and the Mental Health Professionals Network, to name just a few, was recognised with a member of the Order of Australia. It's an extraordinary legacy, and one that John accepts with humility, starting out as a little skinny, freckle-nosed boy running around the paddocks of Killarney. His message to students who are about to launch into the world is equally as grounded. Do your best and just be kind to each other. If you do your best, then you'll be at your best.
John's induction tonight will be accepted by his daughters, Joanne McGrath and Karen Mead.
Deep breath. It's an absolute honour for Karen and I to be here tonight. Dad's wife Lynn and brother Darren and sister Sherry are unable to be with us in person, but are very much here with us in spirit.
As we accept this amazing award on behalf of our beautiful dad, you hold that, who is dearly missed and so fondly remembered, we were always proud of Dad and the achievements and contributions he made in his 81 years on this earth. From humble beginnings on the farm, he found himself travelling around Australia and the world, spreading awareness of mental health and at the same time giving consumers, their families and carers a voice that so desperately needed to be heard. Dad's involvement within the community was always a high priority, and eventually that led to him being elected as the local member in state parliament. During this time, our family was tipped on its head when our brother Shane became unwell. Previously a pretty decent student, his grades declined and he became withdrawn. Eventually he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. We knew nothing about the illness aside from the terrifying misrepresentation portrayed in movies and also the media. As a family desperately seeking support, we attended an information evening at Briley. This night was a shocking awakening to our family, and that was the moment that Dad decided to get more involved, because what they told us that night was nearly to the point of hopelessness. The more he got involved, the more that he could see what needed to be done. He knew that shaking the tree from Warrnambool was not going to work. He needed a bigger stage, and if he was going to succeed. Dad still remained frustrated that Shane never received the services he needed or deserved, and that fired him up. And it fired him up indeed. His involvement in the development as a co-founding member and director of Beyond Blue, Headspace, the Mental Health Professionals Network, just to name a few, is solid proof of that. Our dad made a difference. After Dad died, we received countless messages from people that he had helped over the years. Their lives had been altered by his input. He changed people's lives, and some of those lives were indeed saved as a result. Some of them we just knew nothing about. This makes us even more proud of the beautiful, kind, generous, wise and respectful man he was. He is truly deserving of this award, and in his words, he was chuffed to be inducted into the Emmanuel Alumni. In 2008, Dad received an Order of Australia medal, and I think that this would be fitting to use his words when he accepted the Queen's Honours nomination. As a local Member of Parliament, I experienced firsthand the enormous contribution made in various communities by so many people working in a voluntary capacity toward making this country what it is today. So I am aware of the huge honour that has been bestowed upon me, and I feel privileged and humbled. My award would not have been possible without the continuous unwavering love and support of my wife Lynn and also of my family. I recognise that no man is an island, and without the help and friendship of many people, my work would be diminished significantly. I share this with them, and we shall continue. There is still so much to be achieved in seeking better outcomes in the field of mental health. Dad was determined to get the conversation around mental health started, and he can rest easy knowing that we will ensure that the important conversations continue. Thank you again for this award, and in the words of John Francis McGrath, how good is this?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings our evening to a close, and perhaps to borrow a word from our last speakers and from John, no man is an island, no one is an island. And what a beautiful summary, or what a beautiful way to finish, because in some way it captures the essence of what all this is about. And what we try to do through the induction of alumni into the Inspiring Alumni, and that recognition in the hope that we communicate to our young students who attend Emmanuel College today that we depend on each other for so much. We depend on each other for success, for survival, and with that support and that care and inspiration from those around us, we can achieve so much more ourselves than we would otherwise be able to. For me, it's been an extraordinary journey in some ways, having been involved in this process from the start as the nominations came in, reading all of those nominations, sharing the process with our panel of narrowing that down to those to whom we would induct this evening. And yet, despite having been a part of that process, sitting here this evening and listening to all those stories again, I was stunned, I was inspired, I was in awe, I was proud. And for me, it's been a wonderful evening, and I hope that it has been for you too. But I invite you, please, one last time, to show our gratitude, our appreciation, and our encouragement for those inductees tonight. Congratulations. Just before we leave here, if I can say quickly a thank you to all those who have been involved in helping us. An enormous thank you to Candice Hampstead, who is our alumni coordinator, and really without whom driving this whole process, I doubt that we'd be here this evening, particularly when last year's event was put on hold. I'd like to thank the other staff that are here this evening that have supported us. I'd like to thank Jean Christie, whose work you saw there in all of those beautiful videos telling those stories. To our captains for 2022 behind me here, it's great that they could be here on a Friday night and share this evening with us. To Peter and Tom right up the back, who you can't see, but they're driving everything, every change of the lights and change of the screen and so on. Thank you up there, Tom and Peter. If I have one regret this evening, it would be that all of our current students are somehow not here. And I know that that's impossible, but it is a true regret that they couldn't be here and be hearing and seeing what we witnessed this evening, because it is truly inspiring. I thank you all. I hope you've had a wonderful evening, and I wish you a very safe journey to your home. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, it was. It was really good. Happened to be the chapel windows, the stained glass windows. Bang. And big sort of thing, well, you know, he was living with us and I was from that, so kept it in house. But, yeah.